Open up your heart and mind. Revel in Mother Nature's world of wonder.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We warmly welcome you to this forum where we intend to start a timely dialogue focusing on the integral role played by the Indian Ocean in shaping global prosperity, peace, and ocean conservation. Indian Ocean Strategic Research Center, together with Women in Logistics and Transport Sri Lanka, organized this forum after carefully identifying the need of the time for an urgent deliberation and call to action in order to combat the current crisis in maritime industry at the face of terror and maritime destruction. We are very thankful to you for accepting our invitation in very short notice and supporting us to create this momentum of collaboration towards protecting the region's marine ecosystem.
Covering approximately 1/5 of the total ocean area of the world, Indian Ocean is the smallest, geographically youngest, and physically most complex out of the world's 3 major oceans. It stretches for more than 6,200 miles, connecting 4 continents and provides habitat and livelihood for several thousands of beings. Not only marine life, but also geopolitical relationships between nations and their global trade feed on the Indian Ocean, and a compromise to that would not be affordable and is unimaginable. With that in mind, let us commence today's proceedings. Honoring our traditional roots, we will now light the oil lamp. For that, we kindly invite the following dignitaries and invitees. Our guest of honor, Mr. Frederick Haag, State Minister of Fisheries, Honorable P.R. Nishanta de Silva, His Excellency Badil Hishan Adam, High Commissioner of Malaysia, Ms. Devika Lal, First Secretary, High Commissioner of India, Ms. Kumari Somaratna, Secretary, Ministry of Fisheries,
Mr. Somaratna Vidhanapatirana, Secretary, Ministry of Buddha Sasana, Religious and Cultural Affairs, Ms. Dhammika Vijayasinghe, Chief Secretary, Western Province, Mr. K.D.S. Ruwanchandra, Secretary, Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Aviation, Senior Professor Jayantha Vijayaratna, Chairman, National Aquatic Resources Research and Development Agency, Professor Vasantha Ratnayaka, Vice Chancellor, Ocean University,
Mr. Keith Bernard, Chairman, Sri Lanka Ports Authority, Captain Nirmal Silva, Harbour Master, Sri Lanka Ports Authority, Mr. Biju Ravi, Managing Director, Maersk Lanka Private Limited, Professor Ruchira Kumaran Tunga, Emeritus Professor and former Dean of the Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Sciences, University of Ruhuna, Dr. Dan Malika Gunasekara, Attorney at Law and Senior Legal Counsel,
Ms. Ganadi Alvis will at immediate past Global Chairperson, Senior Professor Gamini Adhikari, Director, Postgraduate Institute of Archaeology, Dr. Namali Sirisoma, Chairperson, Chartered Institute Logistics and Transport Sri Lanka, and also the Director, Career Guidance Unit, General Sir John Kothalavala Defence University,
Professor Renuka Hera, Chairperson, Willat Sri Lanka, Ms. Shehara Birakon, Legal Advisor, Indian Ocean Strategic Research Center, and also Deputy Legal Draftsman of the Ministry of Justice. . Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Almost 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by oceans, and 19.8% of that quantum is covered by the world's third largest ocean, the Indian Ocean. 2.9 billion of the world's population reside in 38 countries that surround the Indian Ocean, and the Indian Ocean is so vast that it borders 4 continents. Countries in the Indian Ocean region have a rich cultural diversity. This cultural diversity spans from tribal communities that bear the bow and arrow living in the Sentinel Islands to radically modernized cosmopolitan societies that live in technologically advanced cities of the region. Cultural diversity is one of the main factors that gave rise to the progress of human civilization. Diverse nationalities, languages, sports, ethics, values and moral systems, and trade practices have enriched and continue to progressively influence the cosmos of human diversity in this region. Marine trade has been the transport cohesion that has connected nations and tribes living within this geographical expanse. Trade in the Indian Ocean has a history that spans several millennia. History records that spices, gems, silk, and even elephants were traded using maritime trade routes spanning across the Indian Ocean. Chinese traders engaged in trade with Europe through Sri Lanka and India by traveling from Southeast Asia westwards, while Arab and European traders traveled across the Red Sea and through Sri Lanka to trade with countries in Southeast Asia and China. Maritime trade flourished on the Silk Route and enriched global economy. However, the Byzantine-Ottoman War opened nations to the critical importance of international sea lanes and its impact on global commerce. In 1453, Constantinople was captured by the Ottoman Empire. Due to the Ottoman closure of sea passages, Europeans were compelled to seek alternative sea routes to reach Southeast Asia. Ancient European explorers were on a ceaseless quest to reach India. Hence, they associated every land mass they encountered to be connected to India. For example, when Columbus discovered a group of islands in the Atlantic Ocean, he named them the West Indies, meaning the west of India. Similarly, the indigenous people who lived in America were named Red Indians. The Indian Ocean and its connections to the surrounding region were of great importance to the Europeans. European colonization began with the arrival of the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama to the port of Calicut in India. In fact, the economic prosperity of Europe was doubtlessly founded upon the rich resources extracted and even extorted from these conquered colonies. Countries both in the Red Sea region and the Arabian Sea region began to prosper and rapidly develop with the discovery of crude oil. Hence, Indian Ocean region that includes the centrally located port of Sri Lanka became a popular sought-after maritime route of traffic for 2/3 of the ships carrying crude oil. Also, 5/8 of cargo regularly travel through this same maritime route of the Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean is of incomparable worth due to its diversity of rich culture and unforetold resources. It has now, in fact, become one of the most thriving and competitive maritime routes in global trade. Therefore, the Indian Ocean Strategic Research Center has initiated the much-needed collective consultative regional discourse and consideration to address ensuing challenges and opportunities that are progressively evolving in this vibrant maritime region of the Indian Ocean. Hence, the areas of sustainability, security, ocean conservation, maritime law, exploration of energy, valuable mineral reserves, and archaeological findings are deliberately researched into by the ingathering of multidisciplinary experts to yield the expected goal of achieving prosperity, peace, and preservation of oceanic wealth to benefit nations and generations to follow. We invite you to join us on this region-transforming journey of united progress.
As you just witnessed, the evening is about deliberately addressing many areas of concerns in order to understand and act to yield the goal of achieving prosperity, peace, and conservation in the Indian Ocean region. Hence, without further ado, let me invite Chairperson of the conference representing Indian Ocean Strategic Research Center and Women in Logistics and Transport, Mrs. Dashma Karunaratne, to formally welcome the gathering.
Guest of honor, keynote speaker Frederick Haag, ministers, members of parliament, ambassadors, and diplomats, distinguished invitees from government authorities, ministry secretariats, officials from Sri Lanka Navy, past global president of Willet Sri Lanka, president of CIT Sri Lanka, conference speakers and panelists, my dear friends from the maritime, logistics, and aviation industry. It is with great pleasure and honor that I address you as the chairperson of this conference titled Prosperity, Peace, and Ocean Conservation of the Indian Ocean region. As you may know, two organizations, the Indian Ocean Strategic Research Center, IOSRC, and Women in Logistics and Transport, WILET, have partnered to organize this conference. Spanning nearly half the globe, the Indian Ocean region is made up of 38 countries, consisting of both developing and advanced economies. It contributes to 30% of the global oceanic area and is home to 30% of the global population. The region is rich in resources, with 40% of the world's offshore oil production coming from the Indian Ocean region. It boasts of immense potential of alternative fuels. The region hosts more than 20 of the world's busiest ports and accounts for 13% of world trade. Indian Ocean region is critical to global trade, and trade binds these diverse communities together. Yet, women's labor force participation is at very low levels. Even though a number of countries in the region are among the wealthiest, others experience extremely high poverty rates, unemployment, and limited opportunities for women, especially for women's economic participation. Through this partnership between WILET and IOSRC, we will collaborate to remove barriers to women's labor force participation, invest in women's economic empowerment, which in turn will drive productivity and greater GDP. In ancient history, the Indian Ocean region was the bedrock of several human civilizations and played a crucial role in trade. History records that in 1453, the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople and gained significant control of the Silk Road and disrupted the trade routes. This action and the taxes imposed had such a negative impact on Europe and its economy that explorers like Christopher Columbus and Vasco da Gama set off on expeditions to find alternative routes to India. Centuries later, is history repeating? Is an unseen hand affecting this important trade arena? Various terror groups, pirates, who are disrupting commercial shipping routes that connect east to west, from Malacca to Suez, creating choke points and damaging the marine ecosystems. Post-pandemic, supply chain resilience is once again tested, extending sea voyages by 14 to 21 days. Incremental freight, capacity constraints, insurance costs, and other inefficiencies will further slow down trade and distance economic revival for countries that are already riddled with struggles. It is imperative to maintain open access to Indian Ocean's resources, critical waterways, and markets. Trade growth in the Indian Ocean has outperformed the world economy since 2000. India, for example, who is among the top five world economies today, a decade ago was the 10th largest economy. Its USD 3.7 trillion, which is estimated for 2024, is expected to grow at 6.5 to 7%. Its world ranking will accelerate upwards. One country has the market, another the deep ports. Another country has the strategic location, another has the capability, and yet another has the geopolitical advantage. Let's complement each other. We cannot have competing visions. We need a shared purpose and a directed passion. This is a clarion call to unite for better trade, economic and social cooperation, and empowerment, while knowing that without peace, there will be no lasting prosperity. Let's commence our collective discussion on this platform to deliberate on Indian Ocean's integral role to shape global prosperity, ocean conservation, and peace. Thank you, and God bless you.
Oceans are home to hundreds of thousands of species, but they are also essential for lives and livelihoods above sea level. At any one time, 1 million seafarers are at work on ships. These men and women often go to sea for months at a time to transport the food we eat, the energy that keeps us warm, and the medicines that save lives. When they go home, their incomes sustain their families and wider communities. Seafarers are not the only ones to call the ocean their workplace. Across the world, millions of fishers rely on resources from the sea, but their profession is one of the most dangerous on the planet.
It's a matter of life and death, really, that over 20,000 people lose their lives at sea every year because of the unregulated state of the fishing industry.
To make the profession safer, IMO is supporting countries to ratify and implement a set of international rules on the safety of fishing vessels, known as the Cape Town Agreement. So far, around 50 states indicated their intention to ratify the treaty. When the agreement enters into force, it will improve the safety of life at sea and help fight illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing, therefore protecting the resources at the heart of those lives and livelihoods. To protect livelihoods above sea level in the long term, we need to preserve life underwater. IMO regulations have cut oil spills from ships and stopped ships from offloading plastic into the sea. IMO is also leading a series of projects to preserve the marine environment, protect biodiversity, and limit the spread of invasive species. 17 specific zones, known as particularly sensitive sea areas, have been designated by IMO. ship routing measures have been specifically tailored to protect their fragile ecosystems and the livelihoods who depend on them. Only by protecting those habitats will we protect the roots and workplaces that the oceans make possible for all of us.
With that line of visuals, let me introduce our keynote speaker for the evening. He's the head of office for the London Convention, Protocol and Ocean Affairs of the International Maritime Organization. He has a background in applied environmental research focusing on marine and coastal zone management and represents IMO in several UN-wide processes and has been deeply involved in matters related to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs, biodiversity in area beyond national jurisdiction, as well as the joint group of experts on scientific aspects of marine environmental protection. To deliver today's keynote speech on current challenges and threats impacting global maritime trade, please welcome Mr. Frederick Haag.
Honourable Ministers, representatives from the diplomatic community, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to join you for this conference on behalf of the International Maritime Organization, IMO. Allow me first to extend a big thank you to the organizers for having me here today for this event. And for me personally, it's fantastic to come back to Sri Lanka, which holds a very special place in my heart since my time as a young Swedish researcher when I visited your beautiful country several times for fieldwork and cooperation with some of your national institutes. Ladies and gentlemen, as I'm sure you're all aware, shipping and maritime activities are the biggest uses of the ocean, carrying over 80% of world trade. In addition, most other ocean-based activities are in one way or another also dependent on ships for their operations, be it fisheries, the oil and energy sectors, or even tourism. The maritime sector is therefore invaluable to global trade and economic growth, both directly and indirectly, something that was made abundantly clear throughout the pandemic. Despite these recent experiences, not everyone realizes that what a profound importance this sector has for all aspects of our lives, and how directly intertwined its operations are with the possibilities for a green and prosperous future, and a sustainable development for all corners of the world. My organization, IMO, is the United Nations specialized agency responsible for international shipping. At IMO, member states have come together for 75 years to adopt conventions and guidelines to create a regulatory framework to make shipping safer and to protect the marine environment. To date, more than 50 conventions have been negotiated under the auspices of IMO, with more than half of those treaties directly related to environmental issues. Ships of various sizes have plied the oceans for centuries, not millennia. But recently the maritime sector, like the rest of the world, has been going through substantial changes and faced new challenges. As an organization, we therefore work tirelessly with our member states and the industry to ensure that the regulatory framework is constantly enhanced and strengthened to meet the demands and challenges. Shipping is a truly global and inherently international industry, connecting livelihoods around the world and affecting all of us. And the regulatory framework must therefore be fair, and it must ensure that no one is left behind as the industry moves towards even greener operations. Since there is no doubt that shipping will be indispensably to global trade sustainable development and the energy transition in the decades and centuries ahead. So maritime transport continues to be the most cost-effective and environmentally sustainable means for transporting large volumes of cargo. And recent events have underscored the vital role of shipping, ports, and seafarers in global trade. In fact, in all of this, we must not forget that the professionals who work at sea, the seafarers, fishers, and other maritime personnel, are the lifeblood of shipping, and their well-being is of utmost importance also to those of us who remain on land throughout our lives. The Secretary General of IMO has often referred to seafarers as the unsung heroes of the global economy. They're on the front line, ensuring that our goods and products reach their destinations, a responsibility that was particularly highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic. In the initial phases of the pandemic, it was expected that seaborne trade would experience a downturn. But it soon also became apparent that due to changes in consumption patterns, there was a strong increased demand for consumer goods, and in particular container traffic. When we added the complexity of the situation caused by lockdowns and travel requirements for seafarers, which caused a large number of seafarers to be unable to leave their ships or found themselves stranded in various parts of the world with no possibility to get home, this all caused a surge of freight rates in many parts of the world, impacting global trade. These were challenging times ahead indeed, and we must learn from those. But even during unprecedented global challenges and uncertainties, the international shipping industry continued to function, ensuring the movement of goods worldwide. And it has to function, as it is the engine that powers the global economy. Ladies and gentlemen, as shipping is such an intrinsic part of the global economy, the transformation towards a greener and more sustainable society also means that the shipping industry needs to be part and play a very important role in this journey. And this includes a series of green transitions, not least climate change related, while at the same time embracing the latest technologies such as digitalization and automation. A significant milestone from our perspective was the last year's adoption of the 2023 strategy on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from shipping. This groundbreaking achievement sets an ambitious goal of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by around close to 2050. But there are also other examples of recent progress that will no doubt have significant positive impacts, such as the work currently ongoing to address marine plastic litter and underwater radiated noise, to name a few. Over the decades, the measures established through IMO have been continuously enhanced to respond to changing needs of society and the further greening of the shipping industry. And in this respect, many of our regulatory advances have paved the way for and catalyzed technological developments and innovation. Recent times have also presented us with new and other emerging threats, such as cyber attacks against ships and maritime businesses, which will also require our continued collaborative efforts. The reason why I'm saying all this is not only that I come from the organization IMO, but also to show an example that for a global industry such as shipping to operate efficiently and safely, it must have a fair and transparent playing field. Here, capacity building, technical cooperation, and partnerships within and between regions and countries are key to share experiences and transfer knowledge to all parts of the world, and thereby ensuring that the regulations that member states agree to in a global body such as IMO are complied with and implemented with throughout the world at the national level. Developments in policy that respond to the needs of the global community are fundamentally interconnected with the regulatory responses and the technological progress and of innovation. But it's also obvious that the developments and discussion in a sector such as the maritime sector does not happen in isolation. The policies and priorities that shape our society also affect the shipping sector, not least due to its central role when it comes to the marine environment. We know that the ocean covers more than 70% of the Earth's surface, and the industry and its governance, include many different stakeholders and intergovernmental institutions, all playing their various parts in the use and management of its resources. Recently, we saw the historic adoption of a new legally binding instrument on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, or BBNJ for short. The instrument was adopted and opened for signature last year, and so far received 86 signatories. In addition, this year member states have vowed to conclude a new international agreement to address plastic pollution, including the marine environment, under the auspices of the United Nations Environment Assembly. And in late 2022, the Convention on Biological Diversity approved a new global biodiversity framework which provides vision and global roadmap for the conservation, protection, restoration, and sustainable management of biodiversity and ecosystems for the next decade and beyond. One important aspiration in this framework is the intention to protect 30% of the environment by 2030, also known as 30 by 30, and in the marine environment, we are very far away from that goal. But all of these developments and many more are also relevant to an industry such as shipping, as the stakeholders and institutions involved in the ocean governance are all intertwined, and shipping is a major part of all ocean activities. Distinguished participants, what I've outlined so far is relevant throughout the world's ocean, but perhaps nowhere more so than in the Indian Ocean, which covers an area of over 70 million square kilometers, and on which a third of the world's population rely extensively on its marine resources and livelihoods for their livelihoods and food security. You live in an area and with a body of water that covers almost 20% of the Earth's surface and is a crucial hotspot for marine biodiversity. It provides migratory routes for marine life, it's crucial for food security, and it's home to more than 30% of the global coral reef cover. With all the 28 countries bordering the Indian Ocean, it is also home to some of the major traffic sea routes connecting Asian and European markets, while at the same time transporting more than half of the world's seaborne oil trade and hosting a quarter of the world's top 100 container ports. So as the case of the Indian Ocean shows, the ocean truly sustains us all, and the maritime sector connects us all. A greener, resilient sector is essential for the needs of future generations, and the maritime sector underpins all sustainable development. So to this end, IMO works closely with member states, industry and other partners, and with the partners throughout the UN family to improve cooperation and dialogue across ocean governance landscape, and build bridges with other sectors and stakeholders on all issues I mentioned today and many more. Through collaboration, the backbone of all our efforts and successes, we can ensure a successful and equitable journey, harnessing the strength of the global maritime community. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, as some of you may be aware, this year's World Maritime theme, which we choose every year in the maritime community to celebrate certain issues and highlight certain issues, is Navigating the Future, Safety First. This theme underscores IMO's commitment to upholding the highest safety standards across all aspects of its organization's regulatory work, while facing the challenges of a fast-changing world, in particular with respect to developments in technology, artificial intelligence, and new threats facing the shipping industry. As the main global forum for international shipping, IMO stands at the forefront, committed to facilitating these vital collaborations within the maritime ecosystem. Together we will drive shipping into a future that is digital, decarbonized and sustainable, a future that is well within our grasp. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that many of these issues I touched upon is of highest relevance and importance in this region too. And I look forward to the continued discussions throughout this evening. I wish you a successful conference, and I look forward to learning from all the excellent speakers and panelists lined up in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haque. International maritime conventions are laid out every year between countries to establish uniform regulations and procedures to preserve and sustain the obligatory and legal duties aimed at various aspects of maritime activities. To be fully aware of what the key international maritime conventions and obligations on focus at present are, we will now hear from an expert in the maritime law and law of the sea. He is an attorney at law, a senior legal counsel, and legal consultant by profession. He holds a Master of Laws in International Law from University of Utrecht in the Netherlands and a PhD in International Commercial Maritime Law from University of Hamburg, Germany. He is a former Dean of Faculty of Management, Humanities and Social Sciences at Cinec Campus, Sri Lanka. He is also a former Executive Director of Ceylon Shipping Corporation. In 1996, he founded Dharma Law Chambers and Consultancy and leads its team to date, providing business with legal assistance across numerous commercial areas of interest. Dr. Dan Malika Gunasekara, this invitation is for you to address the gathering.
Good evening. First of all, I would like to thank Dashma from Vilat, as well as Shanuka from the Indian Ocean Strategic Research Center for inviting me for this important event that I see the think tank of Maritime Sri Lanka is present today at this forum. So, as a knowledge hub, we have very leading professionals, individuals, leading the shipping industry and of the trade, taking Sri Lanka to the world. Distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen, my task was to talk on the geopolitical landscape in wake of the terror threats at sea, the legal phenomena. Now, this is a topic that we are very much facing with the present status quo in the Red Sea. In the wake of attacks taking place led by the Houthis, who are connected, or rather having some kind of connection with the Hamas and the Hezbollah. The world has gone into a different angle with the more ad hoc governments are controlling world politics. And who is behind this? There are many discussions, there are many views, but in reality, we do not know who is really behind this. But however, Red Sea is a very important ocean area for the maritime trade, as we know, after the dredging of the Suez Canal and commencement of the east-west routes bypassing the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa that was used in historic maritime trade. If we talk about the present situation at the Red Sea, it is not strange for any one of you present here because it's very much in the news. Why Sri Lanka has come to the limelight of this conflict, or scenario rather, not because of its strategic location, but mainly due to the fact that the export-import trade involving Sri Lanka's maritime industry uses the straits of Bab el-Mandab as well as the Suez Canal that cut short the maritime route over 8,000 nautical miles and cutting short a journey of around 14 days. Suppose that the ships have to pass through the South African Cape of Good Hope, not only the distance, but also the freight, which is almost 10 times the freight rates that are prevalent in the Red Sea Suez Canal channels. So presently, although some people refer that it is somebody else's war, it is not somebody else's war when it comes to trade to Sri Lanka, as we are benefiting out of the maritime route that we take along the east-west routes. Some refer to this present circumstance as a kind of putting our fingers in the fire. As far as I know, or far as I can understand, it is not that. The operation that takes place in the Red Sea area is not a mere regional one. It is a concern for the whole world. That's why the US, EU are taking the lead. And as a part of the Code of Conduct of Djibouti, where the Combined Maritime Force, CMF, was created with 41 countries to engage in an operation making way for the ships, especially involved in commercial shipping, to go through the straits of Bab el-Mandab as well as Suez Canal as a means of protecting the maritime interests at large, but thus protecting the export-import trade, as well as the very important lives of the seafarers. The seafaring industry is something that we need to protect for the prevalence of the maritime industry as a whole. One of the very important legal principles of limitation of liability for maritime claims is associated with the fact of protecting the maritime industry. If strict liability is imposed on the maritime trade, or rather the shipping community, imposing absolute liability on them in the event of loss of cargo or other incident, no shipping company will ever want to put their ship to the sea, because that would rather put an end to the maritime interests, and the maritime interests cover not only the ship owning industry, but also of the cargo interests as well as of the seafarers. These three are well connected. If we look at the emergence of the law in maritime trade and of the law of the sea in general, the father of international law, or father of modern international law, is the Dutch legal luminary of the yesteryears, Hugo Grotius. Hugo Grotius was the first to write a literature in international law, and he wrote on law of the sea, where he advocated the idea of freedom of the seas, or what was written in Latin as mare liberum. This freedom of the seas was considered the first piece of literature in international law or in the area of law of the sea. Later, it was developed into various other areas in general principles of law, the case law led by the International Court of Justice and of the International Tribunal for Law of the Sea, and also into the much important Constitution of the Seas and Oceans, which is known as the 1982 Convention on Law of the Sea. It took many years, or rather starting with the UNCLOS 1 in early 1960s, to end up with UNCLOS 3 in early 1980s to bring up the Law of the Sea Convention, over 30 years. And the reason was that the participating countries were not in agreement with many of the provisions that were included in this Constitution of the Seas. And to be quite admired, it was a Sri Lankan who led the Law of the Sea Convention to come into force in 1982, and that was our late legal luminary, Shirley Amarasinghe. So Sri Lanka was leading in the laws pertaining to sea, oceans, and maritime. And that's why even today we are talking high about Sri Lanka's maritime law and its importance to our country and to its trade in big way. Freedom of the seas is one of the main doctrine, or rather principles, of international law in general, and in international law of the sea in particular. This gives the freedom for the mariners and the shipping industry to take on to the seas with only very few restrictions being present, especially when navigating in the territorial sea and in the international straits. When navigating in the international, the territorial sea, we have the doctrine of innocent passage, whereas no ship can take any weaponry, no commercial vessel can take any weaponry while the ship is in territorial waters, and the ship has to sail in innocent passage, exercising the right of innocent passage. Now, a similar approach is used in international straits, and this Red Sea Strait of Bab al-Mandab is no stranger that no commercial vessel can take any weaponry or rather ammunition on board such vessel for any purpose. That is why during the time of the Somalian pirates, 15 years ago, that the vessels were allowed to take private maritime security forces on board. And that was under the Code of Djibouti, the Code of Conduct of Djibouti, and which was permitted, whereas the overall protection was provided by the combined maritime forces. Sri Lanka, being one of the participating states of the combined maritime forces, that has over 41 member states in that, have a duty to participate in this exercise. In international law, we know that the state participation for the benefit of the international community is a legal principle considered as a cardinal rule within the framework of the United Nations. In the United Nations Charter, it is the cardinal principle for the states to protect the international peace and security. In line with that, Part 7 of the UN Charter, and in particular with Article 39, deals with the threat or use of force against international peace and security, and that no country can ever attack another, and any country or any interest on whom such right is used can resort to self-defense under its Article 51. Now, these principles have been developed in the United Nations Charter in order to protect the international peace and security, and that has crept into the Law of the Sea Convention as well. The Law of the Sea Convention being the main public law instrument in international law, has in various sections, or articles rather, deal with the importance of protecting the coastal states as well as the flag states, that allow the flagging of vessels by those respective countries. Now with that, the IMO has come forward as the watchdog of commercial shipping, with two main committees with the competence to handle two main areas of shipping, one being maritime safety with regard to the marine environment, and the other one being maritime security for the security of ships, the ports, the facilities of ports under the ISPS code that was brought under SOLAS convention, as well as the security for the ships that came under the SUA convention or Convention on the Suppression of Unlawful Acts Against International Navigation of 1988, and other international conventions pertaining to maritime security. This SUA Convention of 1988 was very quickly adopted and ratified by Sri Lanka, because at that time, the LTTE war in Sri Lanka was very severe, as you know, and Sri Lanka brought in two legislations to deal with maritime terrorism and maritime security. That was the Suppression of Unlawful Acts Against International Navigation and Maritime Activities Act in around 2007, and also the Piracy Act of 2007. So these two legislations played a huge role in protecting our motherland against terrorism. Sri Lanka is in the mid of not only terrorism, but also of piracy, as well as drug and human trafficking. The role played by the UNODC is extremely commendable in a way that the participation of Sri Lanka in a forum like, international forum like UNODC provides for the mechanism to control human trafficking, drug trafficking, international terrorism, and international piracy. The amount of participation that Sri Lanka applied in the wake of the Somalian pirates issues over the last 15 years brought tremendous success. And our maritime private security personnel and ammunition providing agencies were in the forefront of providing these security services, and we as a country gained huge amount of foreign exchange. So by 2023 January, IMO brought in a very important resolution to name and declare that the Western Indian Ocean territory is free of piracy. So that we have lost business ever since then with regard to the providing of private maritime security guards and ammunitions. But in the wake of the Houthi attacks, this is re-emerging. Now we saw during the last 2 weeks or so, the Somalian pirates have back again reactivated themselves. And by catching one of our trawlers, Lorenzo Putatu, that was finally 2 days back released with the auspices of the Seychelles Coast Guards. So this is a part of the combined maritime forces, and you see the threat is re-emerging. So we need to protect not only the commercial maritime or commercial shipping, we also have to protect our fishing community, because fisheries play a huge role in our GDP. And providing security to fishermen should also come as a very primary duty of the state. Participating in the combined maritime forces in what we call the Prosperity Guardian in the Red Sea area is not a waste of funds or waste of resources. As many used to now say that we should not put our fingers into somebody else's war. True. This is not somebody else's war, as I mentioned earlier. We have become a part of the victims in this war. And the most dangerous part of this war is that it is a proxy war. It is not a war that is created by a legitimately elected government or a state. It is a war that is supported by few states, but having the proxy to engage outside the application of the United Nations Convention, or rather the United Nations Charter. So this is the most difficult part to play. It is not a war that we can fight openly like under the United Nations Charter. So therefore we need the Security Council's permission to participate. And the Security Council has now come up with various kinds of resolutions to deal with this issue. And few days back, or rather January 2024, the IMO came up with a very important resolution called the 2722 of 2024 to protect commercial shipping against the various kinds of maritime threats, especially initiated by the Houthis and in the threat of terror and of terrorism and of the war. So therefore, we are now in midst of fighting with a de facto government. It is not a government elected by people. It is not a government recognized by law. But if you see, Yemen is a member of the United Nations since 1947. Iran is a member of the United Nations since 1949. And Israel is a member of the United Nations since 1945. And Sri Lanka is a member of the United Nations since 1955. And all these countries, whether they have a de jure government or de facto government, they are all part and parcel of the international community, part and parcel of the United Nations organization, they are part and parcel of the IMO. So this is the thing, this is the international collaboration that we need to come up with. Our government's decision to liaise with the combined maritime force at this moment is a very bold decision. It is a decision to engage with the international community not only for the protection of our own maritime interests, but also the interests of the entire maritime world. But however, ladies and gentlemen, we are still lagging behind several important adoption and ratification of legal instruments that have been brought about by the International Maritime Organization. I have been very vociferous on this aspect. We like to talk, or we like to call Sri Lanka a maritime hub. If we are a maritime hub, we need to be empowered and geared up with maritime law. This is very important. In order to gear up with the maritime law, we need to bring in the international conventions in line. I'm happy that we have one of the legal draftsmen here who are entrusted with bringing in the local legislations. Some of the international legislations that we need to bring in need the local ratifications in order to become a party to them. So I see the Honorable Minister of Ports and Shipping present here before us. And sir, we urge you as a maritime community to expedite the process of bringing the legal instruments in place, because we are not going to reach the maritime hub status without having the proper international legal instruments as our national laws in this country. And I know you are an eminent lawyer in this country, so I'm sure you have that knowledge to bring about the legal legislations that we need to promote Sri Lanka as a leading maritime nation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Gunasekharan. Governments are quintessential stakeholders in this journey of realizing global prosperity, peace, and ocean conservation. Understanding a nation's role while capitalizing on the resources within its reach is important in order to achieve a sustainable tomorrow for all. To speak to you on the thriving potential and opportunities Sri Lanka has to offer as a nation that's located strategically in the Indian Ocean and its contribution to global trade, I would now like to invite our chief guest, Honorable Nimal Siripal Silva, Minister of Ports, Shipping and Aviation.
Good evening, everybody. I am indeed happy to be here. This seminar organized by the Women in Logistics and Transport. I am happy to see some form of gender equity to be brought into the area of logistics, transport, and in the maritime sector, which I've been striving hard to bring that concept into my port also, and I got into difficulty yesterday and day before yesterday. You may be aware. Anyway, it's a commendable event with all the problems we are facing in the Indian Ocean. Now we are trying to talk about the peace prosperity of the Indian Ocean and how our contribution should be. I had the opportunity to participate in the IORA, Indian Ocean Rim Organization, representing His Excellency the President in Bangladesh a few months ago. And we debated many of these issues there. Indian Ocean is the most important ocean for us as for the world also. Now, those days everybody used to look at Europe, West, for everything. For assistance, for technology, science, education, everything. And especially, we considered Europe as the center of economic activities. But whereas the situation has changed now. Now the Asia has become the center of economic activities in the world. And we are overtaking many of the European countries. The Asia is overtaking many of the European countries. And as a result, Indian Ocean has become more and more important in the international arena. I think most of the ships that carries commodities in and out of Europe, USA, are passing through the Indian Ocean. All the statistics shows very clearly the importance of the Indian Ocean. So therefore, as many ships go through these naval routes in the Indian Ocean, that has created very many problems also to us. Number one, the ocean pollution, the environmental pollution in the oceans. So what have we done? In Sri Lanka, we witnessed some of the debacles which happened here with some of the ships who came into our waters, and we are still environmentally suffering from those things. So therefore, preserving the environment is very, very important. Not only that, ocean has become the most important place for the livelihood of many people in the island nations as well as other nations in Asia. So we have to protect the fishing industry in the Indian Ocean and some of the things happening in the Indian Ocean around our country is alarming. Bottom trawling and unethical fishing practices in the region has made so much of tension even between Sri Lanka and India. That has been happening through time immemorial. But have we been able to resist that? No. So I was listening to the previous speaker. He speaks about the conventions, IOM. We must bring legislation. To what extent the legislation can prevent these things? Who is going to enforce? If we bring legislation that bottom trawling is prohibited, who can enforce that? Even our Navy can't enforce that. So therefore, I don't believe in all these IOM regulation, laws, conventions, etc. Because all the laws in the international arena, or most of the laws, are there but they have never been implemented. And they are all in favor of the strong and mighty communities and the countries. For small countries like us, no use of those laws and regulations. No satisfactory equity has been offered to us in the international arena. So therefore, what is needed is to convince our own people, convince the international community, have more and more dialogue with our neighboring countries and the political leadership of each and every country, how we could preserve the ocean resources without exploiting them in such a manner that will destroy the ocean environment. So therefore, we all will have to raise our voices and give them the message that this is what is needed, what has to be preserved for our future generation. Otherwise, the value of the ocean will be diminished as time goes on. Number two, we were very fortunate. Like in African region, in the Indian Ocean, there were no pirates. Like in Somalia, etc. But our Indian Ocean has been a very peaceful ocean. We did not hear hijacking of ships, boats, or people in our Indian Ocean. But from time immemorial, around Africa, we have witnessed that. So now it is being spread little by little this side to our Indian Ocean also. So what are the precautionary measures we are going to take? All the nations in the Indian Ocean must get together to ensure peace and security in the Indian Ocean. That, of course, we have to fight against terrorism, against piracy. So therefore, you can't fight with the terrorists by preaching bana. In Sinhala language we call by sermons. You have to meet the terrorists with weapons and guns and eradicate them, without which we will not be able to achieve the goals we intend to achieve. So therefore, there must be a very sophisticated, strong security network in the Indian Ocean. Now I had the pleasure of being at the ceremony yesterday in my port, where a naval ship, a ship carrying ammunition and all that from Pakistan came to our port. Indian vessels, Indian ships also came there. So we have a strong fleet. But Sri Lanka, we don't have any ships of that nature, but we have few ships donated by India and USA, etc. So we don't have a sizable force to fight terrorism in the sea. But all our neighboring countries, many of the countries, can assist. So we must formulate a strong security network for the Indian Ocean so that it will be a peaceful and a prosperous ocean as it is, because before the terrorism spread into this area. So therefore, and in the same time, though we are if you take Sri Lanka, we are at a very important geographical location to become a hub in the Indian Ocean in the maritime sector. But we have harnessed that geographical position to attract ships and maritime activities in the Indian Ocean to some extent. But that is not enough. Therefore, our port has to be modernized, absorb new technology, implement new methodology, and become more and more efficient. For example, the port of Colombo was a traditional port till 1981. Thereafter, we started transshipment facilities in our port. And now we have embraced the private sector, bringing a lot of investments. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of being a similar seminar like this, organized by the Colombo Plan together with the State Department of USA for capacity building in the port of Colombo, so which is very much necessary. So therefore, we have to develop our ports. So as far as part of our duty, Sri Lanka has embarked upon the development of our ports to a great extent. We have relied more on the private sector now, but with our own funding now, for example, we are establishing, we are building the deep terminal, the eastern terminal of the Colombo port. And tomorrow it will be a very auspicious day for us. 3 new cranes are coming out of the 12 cranes which we have ordered, out of our own funds, due to about 178 million US dollars. So our government has taken steps to improve the maritime sector, and I'm hopeful that it will contribute a lot to our ailing economy. The government of His Excellency Ranil Wickremesinghe has taken very firm decisions to work together with the private sector and the foreign entrepreneurs in order to build this maritime sector. And we have a very close relationship with India, and especially in developing the Trincomalee Harbour as an industrial port. So therefore, I think Sri Lanka, as far as the Sri Lanka is concerned, we have taken positive steps. It is our firm commitment that Indian Ocean must be peaceful, must prosper, and the people living in the coastlines and of the Indian Ocean must reap the benefit of the Indian Ocean. Their livelihood, fisheries, and many other connected industries connected with the ocean has to be uplifted in order to ensure that the lifestyle of our people are enhanced. We give them a better deal for their lives and for their economy, etc. So therefore, I am sure your seminar today, trying to stimulate all the stakeholders, get their views, and disseminate how we can move forward in order to bring peace and prosperity to the Indian Ocean. That means to the people who are living in the Indian Ocean. Ocean is not only the Indian Ocean, the people who are living in the countries in the Indian Ocean, they should reap the total benefit of the peace and prosperity. We are lucky up to now. But if you take that side, China, Japan, Korea, Philippines, always there are problems about the ownership of the sea, about the ownership and struggles to whom the sea belongs. But we have less problems, very minimal problems in the Indian Ocean. So we must preserve it. We should not fight over the ocean and create uncertainty in the Indian Ocean and disturb the peace and prosperity which we have earned up to now. So therefore, it is very necessary to enter into dialogue, have constant consultations with all our neighboring countries in order to ensure how we could retain the peace and prosperity which we have already gathered upon. So therefore, I must say, from the part of our government, we have given the leadership. His Excellency the President will be elected to the chair of the IORA in few days' time, and we will give the fullest cooperation to all the neighboring nations in the Indian Ocean in order to achieve your objective. I am grateful to the organizers of this conference for organizing this conference. There are a lot of conferences on many issues connected with the connected in the maritime field, and I consider this as a very, very important issue. And we must get engaged with IOM, and if there are any gaps and lapses in our part to bringing legislation in Sri Lanka, we are prepared to do so. But we have done most of the legislation that is required, but there may be certain gaps. I don't say that we are a perfect nation in bringing all the legislation, but of course, as I said before, I don't believe legislation alone will help to bring prosperity and good work in this area. So therefore, what is necessary is the deep understanding of the problems and love for the environment. We should love it, we should care for the environment, we should preserve the environment, not only in our own, inside the countries, but in the ocean also. So therefore, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to address you, and I appreciate the good work done by the organizers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Indian Ocean.
The video that we've just witnessed lays out the theme for our next segment. As we speak today, the freedom of navigation in the Red Sea is being compromised by rebel attacks, and nations across the globe are uniting against imminent terror and threat that are disrupting maritime passage through international ports of call. Not only the dangers of terrorism, but also drugs peddling and piracy have disturbed worldwide maritime peace and trust, and continues to pose a great threat to the world's economy and its ecosystems.
To speak on different aspects of this ongoing terror and crisis, we have a panel discussion ready with some experts of their respective fields who will explain to us further on this and the impact of it towards global economic and oceanic ecosystem. Without further ado, let us invite our panelists. Introducing our first panelist for the day. She is the founder dean of Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Sciences and Technology, University of Ruhuna, where she also served as a senior professor of fisheries biology at the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture until her retirement in 2019. Recognizing her 40 years of service, she has been appointed as an emeritus professor in the same department. Her expertise has also been put to work by actively contributing in preparing curriculums for fisheries biology at several educational bodies. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our first panelist for the discussion, Professor Ruchira Kumaranatunga.
Moving on to our next panelist. He has been a dedicated professional in the shipping industry for over 26 years with knowledge and expertise in logistics. He is currently the managing director of Maersk Sri Lanka and has been with the AP Moller Maersk Group for 18 years. He has worked across the landscape in India, holding various leadership roles and extensive experience in developing and implementing strategies for growth, leading and managing teams, and driving organizational transformation. During his tenure, he has gained experience in ocean, LCL, supply chain optimization, warehousing, transportation, and other E2E logistic areas. Mr. Biju Ravi, this invitation goes to you.
Our next panelist is the Group Director of Maharaja Organization, where he heads the group's 7-channel media network, which is Sri Lanka's largest. He is also the leader of Gammatha, an award-winning rural development movement. He is a Fulbright Scholar, an Eisenhower Global Fellow, and an Asia 21 Fellow. He is an internationally certified Swift Water Lifesaver and a global ambassador for the Sri Lanka Life-Saving Association. He is also well known for his active engagement and leadership in bringing a transitional change in the nation through media and its influence on the community. Let me now have the honor of inviting Mr. Siobhan Daniel for today's panel discussion. Our next panelist counts over 20 years of experience in shipping and logistics and ports and terminals with strong understanding of business development, commercial strategy, and operational functions. Currently, he holds the position of Chief Executive Officer of Colombo West International Terminal Private Limited, which is a consortium of India's largest port operator, Adani Ports and Special Economic Zone Limited, Sri Lanka's leading enterprise, John Keel's Holdings, and Sri Lanka Ports Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our next panelist, Mr. Harikrishnan Sundaram, on stage.
Next, I would like to invite our chief guest of the day, Mr. Frederick Hart, to join the panel discussion as well. And now I would like to invite Mrs. Dashma Karunaratne, the moderator of the day, to start our panel discussion. Dashma, over to you.
Last. Due to the time limitation, I will start with my panel, my questions. My first question is to Biju Ravi. Amidst the disruption taking place, which has negatively impacted the movement of shipping from the east to west especially, the main artery of trade in the backdrop of increased freight charges fueled by insurance and other costs. In your view, how should the Indian Ocean region collaborate to overcome the disruption?
Hello. Thank you, Dashma. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. Thanks for that question. I think it's a very imminent and current scenario what we have. The Red Sea crisis is very real, and as we know that mostly around 30% of the global trade used to do their transits through the Red Sea or the Suez Canal. And today, as we stand, almost 90% of those traffics has been diverted via Cape of Good Hope now. Definitely, this is going to take up a big toll on the overall maritime or shipping industry. It has definitely driven the cost up today. The transit times have gone really high, and most of the exporters and importers are facing a lot of difficulties. What we can do, given the current scenario, is, of course, the first thing which comes to every mind is the alternative routing, which has been done as of now, but that's at the cost of 14 days additional transit, more CO2 emissions, and also the freight rates going up, is it? What we can do is probably have a risk mitigation to look at within the Indian Ocean communities, the countries and shipping community, how we can reduce the risks of this by planning better networks across Cape of Good Hope and ensuring that a capacity crunch is not created in the market, which can lead further up to the rate increases. Then the second thing what we could do is also to have some diplomatic dialogues within the countries in the Indian Ocean. I think it's too early right now. There has not been much discussions around it, but I'm sure if all the countries come together and have a diplomatic approach towards this to resolve this issue, that could also help the overall shipping industry a lot. Third thing would be the information sharing platforms. I think most of the governments and the shipping companies can come together and definitely share the informations with each other, which is related to the Red Sea crisis or delays or any kind of attacks coming our way. I think that can also lead to much better planning, not only for the shipping lines, but also to get this information across to the exporters and importers as well, so that they can plan their supply chains accordingly. I'm sure by working together as a shipping community, we can definitely overcome some of it, if not all, because this is going to be a bit of a long-term challenge which we are going to face. But I'm sure there will be an end to it at some time, and hopefully it would come. Other important thing also I want to highlight is if you've seen, there has been a big concern by all the shippers and importers that the freight rates are going to go up. But what we are seeing is, unlike in COVID, the rates have kind of peaked now and it's not going up. So if you see the Shanghai rate index last week, it's come down by 2.57% comparatively. So that's what overall I think. Thank you.
The next question is to you, Frederick Hart, drawing from what was shared by the Minister also. Could you elaborate to us how steps are being taken by IMO to ensure safety of ships and personnel, having withdrawn the risk of pirates earlier last year, I think. If you could elaborate that to us, because just yesterday, I think there was a news article that came on BBC which said the White House has blamed an Iran-backed military umbrella group for a deadly attack on a US base in Jordan, as it considers how to hit back. So it is a very much prevailing threat. And could you just elaborate to us how IMO is positioning itself to overcome these threats?
Thank you, and let me put it in the context of several of situations that happened over the last years as well. And in this in particular, what IMO is doing is working very, very closely with other UN agencies throughout the UN family. Our Secretary General was in the Security Council just a few weeks ago as well, newly elected Secretary General. And what we do is that we work with the states affected in the area, but also the shipping community. But we work very much through the UN system as such. That's what we do as a UN agency. And if I can take one step further on that, I think picking up at what the Honourable Minister said as well on the regarding the fact that laws alone cannot achieve things, just setting the laws or writing laws, but we actually have to have the dialogue with all the stakeholders, specifically in this situation in the Red Sea, etc., but also in the wider discussion you're having here about the Indian Ocean in the strategic point of view. From IMO side, we always repeat the mantra, set global rules, implement them locally, ensure transparency, a level playing field, etc. But in many ways, it is that connection between those that are affected that are the most important. And I think that that's what we have been doing more specifically in this case. We don't always take the lead in all aspects, because some of the aspects are both global and regional, but we are the forum and the connector between all the stakeholders in the shipping community and the maritime community, and especially those that are affected in this situation, such as the one in Red Sea and Gulf of Aden.
Am I audible? Another question to you,
Being a good corporate citizen has always been an integral part of the way Maersk does business. And in terms of UN sanctions, UN-related sanctions, and various other measures, Maersk has always been an early adopter. In terms of your core values, code of conduct, all of these initiatives clearly demonstrate your commitment towards global peace, etc. Could you elaborate to us the importance of why an organization such as Maersk, and as a going concern, an organization, why it should embrace these policies?
Thank you. I think embracing such convention is extremely important. It's not only about the compliances, but also accepting as a way of life. Not only about following the laws, but doing the right things. I think that's super critical, and I've been fortunate and also proud to be in such an organization which takes it at the utmost importance, and not only in words, but also in action. And I think the ethical behavior for an organization is super important because of what it contributes to the society, to the sustainability, and in the employee welfareness. And I think Maersk has always had that value at the top of the list, and they have behaved and demonstrated that it is super important. Second thing I would also say is how it helps the reputation of the organization, because as a shipping organization, you have multiple stakeholders. It's not only customers, but also investors, government officials, and all. And when you encore such values, I think it gives a very good positive approach from these investors and from the government authorities that this is an organization which knows how to operate, and they embrace the values and do the right things. I think those are the few points I have. And one more important thing I would say is the employee engagement. Because the more you engage your employees and embody these values to them, they definitely like to work in such an environment, and especially in today's youth, who are very consciously and socially aware of these things, and they give importance to such things on how an organization is operating. Sustainability is another one. You have to take it seriously in today's, because even the buying patterns of the customers are today socially responsible. So if you look at all these elements, I think Maersk has definitely, I would say, aced it in that way, because that's the most important part of the organization today. And good thing is it is done globally. It is not done in pockets. Whether it is a small country or a big country doesn't matter. It is applied to all employees equally, and I think that's been the success there. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is to Professor Ruchira Kumaratunga. With 80% of the world's oil shipments moving across Indian Ocean, and the activity of terrorists, they adopt informal methods of demonstrating acts of violence. In that backdrop, we are all very much aware of the impact to the marine ecosystem. However, could you elaborate further to us, drawing from your expertise? Thank you.
First of all, I must thank you for inviting me for this occasion. Actually, when compared to Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, we know very little about the distribution and migration of marine organisms, because the countries which are surrounding the Indian Ocean are not very wealthy, so they don't have joint expeditions to monitor the environment. Although we have a lot of very important marine resources. So when there is a war, there can be many things happening. Explosions, then release of toxic material, oil, and also if they use radioactive substances that can get released into the environment, all these things will be in a soup. And when it gets to the environment, now we talk about fish. For the fish to come up to the catchable size, it takes several years. Now when these toxic material are in the environment, they can get into the fish through food chains and food webs. Now if you take oil and heavy metals, they can stay in the sediments for a long time. And sometimes it can come up not from the place where they are released, but it can come up from some other place where there is upwelling. Okay? So I can remember when in Japan, when the nuclear disaster occurred, we detected cesium in seafish, but not to the toxic level, but there was cesium. Okay? So whatever the toxic materials released during the war can come to us through fish. Now when it comes to small fish, they will take about 2 years to come to the catchable size. But when it comes to tuna and swordfish, it will take 5-6 years to come to the catchable. During that period, they can accumulate all these toxins inside their bodies through the food chains. Now when I talk about the food chains, there are animals from microscopic to macroscopic. Okay? So these we can't say that microscopic organisms are not important because we are not directly eating them. When the fish eat them, these toxic materials accumulate in the fish for several years, and we are not only eating one fish, we are eating loads. That means we are ingesting loads of toxic material at once. Okay? And also, when we talk about the Indian Ocean, we are not only talking about fish as a resource. There are mammals, turtles. Now, if the temperature increases, now, if there is a fire for several weeks, the water temperature increases. Except mammals and birds, all the other animals are cold-blooded animals. Even if the temperature of the water increases by 2 or 3 degrees Celsius, it can badly affect the organisms. Now, especially the small fish and fish eggs. Since we don't know where the fish are breeding and how they are migrating to their the feeding grounds, how they are migrating to the breeding grounds, we have not identified most of these circuits. Okay? So if this kind of a war occur in an area where these sensitive animals are living, then sometimes you might, at once, millions of fish larvae will die without any notice. So we will feel it in another 2-3 years, in the case of small fish like sardines and herrings, but in tunas and other fish, we will feel it in 5 or 6 years' time. So gradually, our marine resources, living resources, also will gradually disappear from the environment.
Just leading on from what you mentioned about marine resources, so the elephant in the room is that Indian Ocean has marine resources, multiple countries. How would one nation preserve its marine resources? You mentioned in our informal discussions, you mentioned the conflicts that occur and how we hear very often fishermen who are trawling in beyond its boundaries. Could you just elaborate? How can a country, a nation?
Now, the Indian Ocean, the rim countries should get together. If one country can't afford to really look into the security of the resources, we all should get together. First of all, we should know what is there. To secure the resources, we should first study the resources and quantify them. We should know where they are and how they are moving, how their dynamics, everything has to be studied. So research is needed. Now, we have the academic institutions where we are training undergraduates in all these fields. But after training, because they don't have the facilities to continue their studies, they just go to developed countries. We lose our resources. Okay? So we must, these countries get together, have a good research vessel, and actually get our scientists to go in these research vessels and monitor the environment, monitor the resources, and we can have them. We can have a data repository. Whenever disaster occurs, we know what has been there and what would be affected by this kind of activities. So actually, first of all, we have to get together to secure the resources.
Thank you. My next question is to Siobhan Daniel. Would you like to elaborate on the thriving potential of this region and also your own nation? How can we convert threats and weaknesses to opportunities and strengths? Professor Ruchira mentioned about the exodus of skilled labor, etc., skilled labor and graduates. Is this a time to leave Sri Lankan shores or brace ahead to optimize our strategic location?
Thank you, Dashma, for having me, and it's really great to be here. I'm truly honored. I think our location is a strategic asset, both in terms of our geopolitical shipping lane, choke point, which obviously is valuable as a from a global military standpoint, but also in terms of ensuring our neutrality, Sri Lanka's neutrality to global trading partners, and that makes Sri Lanka's position incredibly important and valuable, as I think all of us would agree. And this then requires of us to be extremely prudent in how we assess, not just, as the professor mentioned, the value of our ocean resources, but also what that entails in terms of our territory, and also then what kind of decisions must we make in order to secure our national interest. Now, in terms of understanding our own natural resources in terms of the ocean, the global community is quick to remind us of our responsibility to the world. But what about their responsibility to us? See, our exclusive economic zone is about 200 nautical miles. It is infiltrated morning, noon, and night by every country around us. There are something like 5,000 mechanized trawlers in Tamil Nadu, of which about 2,500 set off on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, and nearly all of them come within 500 meters of our coast, devastating our fish resources. The northern areas of Sri Lanka used to supply about 40% of our fish production in the 1980s and 90s. I think it's down to something like 5% today. Add to that, Sri Lanka's application to expand its exclusive economic zone to 800 nautical miles, which would make it about 32 times the size of our land territory, and give us access to unbelievable riches in terms of living and non-living resources in the ocean, would make us one of the most richest nations on earth. But there is no conversation about this. You see, we can't be held responsible for being blessed by nature. That can't be our disadvantage. If you look at the Middle East, they got oil, and that was their blessing, and they were able to leverage on that. Sri Lanka has her ocean, which is why I think we should call it the Sea of Sri Lanka, within the Indian Ocean. The Sea of Sri Lanka within the Indian Ocean. It might sound ludicrous, but unless we get out of this mindset of being this little pearl of the Indian Ocean, the teardrop of the Indian Ocean, and reimagine ourselves as the granary of the East, we're never going to make wise and prudent decisions. Now, coming back to those decisions that we take today, it's important that we discern the difference between fighting pirates in the Indian Ocean and getting embroiled in something that is extremely complicated. Now, I understand that these decisions are not easy to be made, and therefore they must not be made quickly. They must be made with lots of prudence and experience, understanding the repercussions not just today and tomorrow, but in 25 and 50 years. Because I think that's what leadership, that's the kind of leadership that we require. So we're at a pivotal moment, Dashma, an important moment. But I think one of the most important things is to understand the potential of this nation in terms of her resources, in terms of her geopolitical location, and then decide, are we actually non-aligned, or are we aligned, or are we pretending to be non-aligned, and are we actually aligned, or what are we actually? Because those positions will dictate the decisions that we take, and then the repercussions of those decisions for years to come. Thank you.
So many corporates carry out a lot of CSR activities and get a lot of publicity, etc., etc. Come back. So when we talk about sustainable development goals, it's about empowerment. And here in Sri Lanka, a greater portion of our USD income comes from women. How do we upskill this? Upskill the talent that we have in terms of the unskilled labor and caregivers who are in like Korea, Dubai, Lebanon, Israel, so on and so forth. How do we safeguard these women in times of pandemic, in times of terror, and how do we preserve their families? Because when a mother is away from home in a foreign land, seeking a better horizon for their family, sometimes it can be a mirage, they return back to dysfunctional homes. So yes, CSR is good, but as corporate citizens, how can we empower women? Because as I mentioned before, they are the key contributors in terms of income, the USD income for Sri Lanka. So this question is to Shevan, yes.
Well, I can give you my wide thoughts on this. I think that enhancing and strengthening our social safety nets is important. And I think we have three vibrant levels of government to do that. We have the parliament, provincial councils, and then we have local government. And I think all three of those levels must be perhaps redirected to provide those strong social safety nets as opposed to just only infrastructure. Not that it doesn't happen, it does, but the refocus must be on strengthening those social safety nets because young people in particular and women are now increasingly more vulnerable. This situation right now in Myanmar is a classic example. This did not happen earlier. Our migrant workers were always in some sort of danger. They were eternally being abused. But what's happening in Myanmar today is particularly worrying because if you don't know, there are 56 Sri Lankans currently in Myanmar being held in indentured slavery almost. They're not being released by the rebels in Myanmar. But they didn't actually go out of Sri Lanka as migrant workers officially. They went in as tourists. They were smuggled across the border from Thailand to Myanmar, and now they're being held unless they pay a bond of something like $8,000, and they're being tortured, raped, and their lives and the lives of their families are in a terrible state. So we have to be able to protect these people because they're so vulnerable, but they're also so desperate. That is a massive responsibility, not just that does not only lie with the government, I think with all of us as corporate citizens. And secondly, the social safety nets of the families, as you quite rightly pointed out, of the mothers and the fathers who leave families out of sheer desperation and move out of the country. We have to be able to understand how that devastates a family, and when you devastate a family, you devastate a village. That's how Sri Lanka's social setup is made up, thousands and thousands of villages. So I think we need, considering this economic crisis, which is new, and it's now impacting newer and newer parts of the country, there has to be some fresh thinking as to how we grapple with this issue as well. Thanks.
The next question is to Hari. As you're representing Colombo West International Terminal and also Adani, there is a lot of potential in the region. We all discussed this. And India is currently among the top 5 countries in the world in terms of GDP. And when we look at the growth of GDP, growth of India in terms, it's something like 6.5% to 7% is forecast. So, Hari, this question is to you. Yes, we would like you to elaborate the potential that you see in a port perspective in the region and also here in Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Dashma. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to the Minister, Secretary, Chairman, Dustin. Hi. So, yes, CWIT, the reason for Adani Ports to invest in Colombo was pretty natural because Colombo is a very, very important port in the maritime route. It's in the main shipping route, one of the most important hubs, caters to almost 60 to 70% of cargo from India. And like you said, India is growing at a very, very healthy rate of 7 to 8% per annum. And the next 10 years is going to be probably at a similar rate or even higher. So Colombo is very, very well positioned to cater to the needs of the growing Indian cargo, subject to capacity coming on time. That's the most important thing. I think I attended an event yesterday, the Colombo Plan, where the minister spoke and chairman spoke, and very impressive to see the capacity development plan, which is going to be in place for Colombo. So Singapore and Malaysia on the Southeast Asian region, and on the Middle East, it's going to be Abu Dhabi and Dubai, right? So we are competing with these guys. So the infrastructure, the technology, the ease of doing business, everything has to be comparable with what the other terminal or the other countries are offering. In fact, that's become a very, very basic requirement of all the shipping lines and all the customers. So I think we are getting there. A lot of initiatives are planned by the Port of Colombo in terms of new technologies, the port community system, the cranes that are going to come to WCT, that is CWIT and ECT, are the largest and the latest cranes that are available today in the market or globally. And partly to answer your question on the women, opportunity for women or the female workforce, I would say since we are focusing a lot on automation, I think that's a great opportunity for female workforce to come and work on cranes. This will be completely remotely operated. So there is a lot of automation and technology in place. So there will be an equal opportunity employment provided, unlike the typical manually operated terminals elsewhere. So I think that's why we are looking at. So probably in the next 3 years, Port of Colombo will achieve a capacity of 15 million TEUs, which is going to put us at least 5 or 6 rankings above where we are currently. And subject to the future development plans that are going to be planned, I think we are well poised to cater and be a very, very important port of call in the region. Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. And we are indeed, on behalf of Billet, encouraged to hear the autonomy and how there will be female operators. So thank you for that. I think any closing comments? I think Professor Ruchira had something to comment about.
That we can get the women to be involved in mariculture programs, seaweed farming, and sometimes even fish cages. Actually, they can look after the fish cages. And also there are a lot of coastal resources which can be really managed by women. And now we are talking about glutin production in fish in certain areas. At that time, we are transporting them from Mannar to Colombo, actually under very unhealthy conditions. Without just transporting, why can't we can them there? Why are we bringing it to Colombo? Now, if you look at Israel, they have kibbutz systems. In the kibbutz system, when the fruits are there, they start canning fruits. When the fish are there, they process the fish. Okay? So like that, we have to find the resources. Now, what we are doing, now we have ilmenite, black sand. We are just selling it to the outsiders without doing any value addition. In Thailand, they are really using it for the solar panels. So we need money to start this kind of industries in the country. Even women can get involved in this kind of industries because there are women who are educated enough. There are a lot of women scientists who have really got the necessary training and education. Okay? So I think we are not looking after our resources properly. We only think about immediately getting some money. Okay? So we should not do that. We don't have to go with the begging bowl if we look after our resources properly. Okay.
Any other closing comments from the panel?
No, I think it's good. Thanks, Dashma, for having us. I would also like to say that the current crisis also gives us an opportunity as the country because we are seeing more and more transshipment cargoes coming into Colombo now. I think this is just a beginning and it's only going to increase in the coming days. I think we as a country and as a port need to be ready for that to handle such cargo. So I'm sure with the capacity what we have today, maybe there need to be looked at something alternative or something better, how we can speed up the whole process, whether it is transshipment or the local imports, which will enable to get in more cargo for the port. So I think that's something we should definitely look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just thought I also build on what's been said so far as well. And I think this is really encouraging to see these dialogues happening at this time and among these partners. Also realizing that we need to build those linkages and build the capacity now for what we know, but also because we know that there are other pressures coming to our oceans and in the Indian Ocean as well, I'm sure. We have deep sea mining, we have climate change mitigation technologies, all will add extra pressures on our natural resources. So if we have those communication channels and understand each other now, we're better equipped for what comes in the future as well.
So thank you very much for your attention. There will be a presentation of tokens of appreciation to the minister and to the panel. In closing, it is our view that individually as countries, we are strong. However, if we collaborate and cooperate, we become unbeatable. So this is a clarion call for us to unite, collaborate for greater heights. Thank you.
And also, we would like to invite the Honorable Minister on stage for the picture. Could we also have the Secretary of the Ministry of Shipping, Ports and Aviation and also SLPA Chairman on stage? We also request Honorable Minister and the panelists to remain on stage as we have arranged tokens of appreciation for your efforts today. To give away the first token of appreciation to Mr. Frederick Haag, I would like to invite Ms. Shehara Veerakon, representing IOSRC. And also to give away the token of appreciation to Honorable Minister Nimal Siripal de Silva, I would like to invite Professor Gamini Adhikari, representing IOSRC. And to present the token of appreciation to Mr. Siobhan Daniel, I would like to invite Mr. Upul Bandaranayaka, representing IOSRC. And to give the token to Mr. Biju Ravi, I would like to invite Mr. Sunil Jayawardena, representing IOSRC. Also, to give away the token of appreciation to Professor Ruchira Kumaranatunga, would like to invite Ms. Mihiri Fernandinez, representing IOSRC. To present the token of appreciation to Mr. Harikrishnan Sundaram, I would like to invite on stage Ms. Kaushani Pereira from Organizing Committee and Vilat Sri Lanka. And also, we would like to have our speaker, Dr. Dan Malika Gunasekara, on stage, as we also have arranged a token of appreciation to you. And to present that, I would like to invite Professor Renuka Herath, representing Vilat Sri Lanka. Thank you, Honorable Minister and dear speakers. Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Minister and dear speakers.
With that, we have come to the end of today's program, and I would now like to invite Mr. Daniel Disanayake, Senior Legal Counsel and Advisor to Indian Ocean Strategic Research Center, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. It has been an illuminating evening of productive and enlightening discussion, new insights from leading experts, a distinguished gathering of the bigwigs of the industry, those who matter in the industry, and we are grateful today for Honorable Nimal Siripala de Silva, Minister of Aviation, Ports and Shipping. Thank you, sir, for your presence today and your illuminating speech and your encouragement and your suggestions, sir, of the way forward to handle the strategic challenges faced today regarding Indian Ocean shipping. As you quite rightly said, sir, it's a small country, but we need to use strategy and cooperation. So we, as the Indian Ocean Center for Strategy and Research, have initiated this discussion along with the women in transport and logistics, WILAT, to generate the conversation, to start the discussion, and to move forward as to the local and international impacts of these current situations. We want to thank our guest of honor, Mr. Frederick Haag, for gracing this occasion with your presence and your words of wisdom from the International Maritime Organization. Thank you, Mr. Haag, for coming, traveling all the way down, and we are honored by your presence. We thank Honorable Pial Nishanta de Silva, State Minister of Fisheries, for your presence, sir. We are grateful for the presence of Honorable Champika Ranawaka, Member of Parliament and former Cabinet Minister. We are thankful to Professor Dan Malika Gunasekara, who is an accomplished legal expert in the field of maritime law. Thank you for that. Thank you, sir, for that impactful and insightful presentation, giving us new knowledge about the legal and practical issues and the international context. We're grateful for our panelists. The dynamic Shevan Daniel, thank you for your presence here and your inspiring insights as always. We thank you, Mr. Biju Ravi, Managing Director, Maersk Lanka, for your presence here, sir. Thanks for sharing your insights. And we appreciate you you said our country, we thank you for choosing us as your adopted nation while you are working here. Thank you, Professor Ruchira Kumaratunga, ma'am, for your valuable input in this panel. Thank you, Mr. Hari Krishnan Sundaram, sir, for your presence here and your insights of wisdom as a corporate leader. We are indeed grateful to all the diplomatic corps who are represented here. We are grateful for the honorable ambassadors for your presence here, heads of missions and diplomatic staff. We are grateful for the presence of senior government officials, secretaries to ministries who are present here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your presence here. Thank you for, we also are thankful for the chairman of authorities, heads of government. Thank you for the academics who are here, the vice chancellors and members of senior maritime education institutions and academic institutions, thank you very much for your presence here. It is valued. And also for the corporate giants in the maritime and shipping sector here who are well represented here, thank you for your valuable time. This is about you. This is about the industry and about our nation, and we thank you for spending your time here to be a part of this discussion. We also would like to thank Sri Lankan Airlines for their generous sponsorship for some of the panelists. Finally, a big word of thanks to our conference chairperson, Dashma Karnaratna, chairperson of WILAT. You have been an inspiring figure here and a dynamic and motivated organizer. We thank you for your contribution, ma'am, and also that of your team from WILAT. Finally, on behalf of the Indian Ocean Strategic Research Center, I would like to thank each and every one of you for your presence here. We thank you for a big thank you also to the staff of Golf Face Hotel for your wonderful service. Thank you all ladies and gentlemen, and please join us for dinner shortly. Thank you.